Chapter 2, A Joyful Beginning. Holly and Jack hurried back to Holly's bakery, the warmth inside a stark contrast to the biting cold of the forest. The scent of gingerbread and peppermint filled the air, a comforting reminder of the town's festive spirit. Holly locked the door behind them, her eyes scanning the street outside before she turned to Jack. "We need to figure out what's going on," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She placed the piece of the celestial star on the counter, its light pulsing gently. "Kristoff said the star controls Mary Hollow's magic. If that's true, we need to understand how it works, and fast." Jack nodded, his ice blue eyes reflecting the star's glow. "I've heard legends about the celestial star, but I never thought it was real. It's said to be the source of all Christmas magic, the heart of winter itself." Holly leaned against the counter, her brows furrowed in thought. If Kristoff wants to control the star's power, he must have a way to harness it. We need to find out what that is and stop him. Jack paced the bakery, his fingers tapping against his chin. "The star's magic is ancient, predating even my time. We need to delve into Mary Hollow's history, find any records or artifacts that might help us understand it better." Holly's eyes widened. "The town archives. They're kept in the library basement. If there's anything about the star, it'll be there." Jack stopped pacing, his expression serious. "We need to be careful, Holly. If Kristoff finds out we're onto him, he won't hesitate to strike back. We can't let him know we're investigating." Holly nodded, her jaw set with determination. "We'll be discreet. But we can't waste time. The enchanted ornament exchange is in chaos, and who knows what Kristoff will do next." Jack placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch comforting. "We'll figure this out, Holly. Together." Holly looked up at him, her green eyes meeting his. She smiled, her resolve strengthening. "Together," she agreed. "Now, let's get to the library. We've got some research to do." Holly and Jack slipped out of the bakery, their breath misting in the chilly air. The streets were eerily quiet, the usual festive buzz replaced by a tense hush. They hurried towards the library, their footsteps crunching on the freshly fallen snow. As they turned a corner, Jack suddenly stopped, his hand shooting out to halt Holly. "Look," he said, pointing towards the ground. A faint glow emanated from the snow, shimmering like stardust. It stretched out in a thin line, disappearing around another corner. Holly crouched down, her fingers hovering over the luminescent trail. "It's warm," she murmured, her eyes widening. "And it's pulsing with magic. This must be from the celestial star." Jack nodded, his expression grave. "The star shattered into 12 pieces. If each fragment leaves a trail like this." Holly stood up, her eyes following the glowing path. "We need to find the other fragments before Kristoff does. If he gets his hands on all of them, there's no telling what he could do." Jack took her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "We'll follow the trail, gather the fragments, and keep them safe. But we need to be careful. Who knows what kind of magic each piece holds." They set off, the magical trail guiding them through the winding streets of Mary Hollow. The glow intensified as they approached the town square, the epicenter of the chaos. The great Christmas tree stood tall and proud, but its lights flickered uncertainly, reflecting the town's disarray. Holly hesitated at the edge of the square, her eyes scanning the anxious crowd. "We can't just walk in there and start searching for fragments. People are on edge, and Kristoff's men are everywhere." Jack squeezed her hand, a small smile playing on his lips. "Then we'll have to be clever about it." "How about a distraction?" Holly raised an eyebrow, a playful glint in her eyes. "What do you have in mind?" Jack grinned, his ice blue eyes sparkling with mischief. "Leave that to me. You just be ready to follow the trail as soon as the coast is clear. Holly and Jack skirted the edge of the town square, their eyes locked on the glowing trail. It wove between the legs of chattering townsfolk, oblivious to the magical path in their midst. The scent of hot cocoa wafted through the air, growing stronger as they approached Ginger Snapdragon's stand. The line of customers stretched long, each clutching their mugs, eager for a taste of Ginger's famous brew. Jack paused, his gaze scanning the crowd. "We need to get to the front without drawing attention." Holly nodded, a plan forming in her mind. She whispered, "I'll create a distraction. You slip behind the stand and follow the trail." Before Jack could respond, Holly stepped forward, her hands weaving a spell. She murmured under her breath, her fingers sparking with magic. Suddenly, a chorus of tiny bells jingled overhead, drawing every eye upward. A flurry of snowflakes danced in the air, each one shimmering like a tiny star. The crowd oohed and awed, their attention diverted. Jack seized the moment, slipping through the crowd with the grace of a winter breeze. He ducked behind the hot cocoa stand, his eyes following the luminescent path. It led straight to the counter, where Ginger was ladling out steaming mugs of cocoa. Ginger, a plump woman with rosy cheeks and a warm smile, didn't notice Jack at first. She hummed a festive tune, her hands moving with practiced ease. Jack crouched down, his fingers brushing the snow. The trail ended abruptly at the base of the stand, the glow pulsing gently. He looked up, his eyes meeting Ginger's as she turned to grab more mugs. She jumped, her hand flying to her chest. "Jack Frost. You nearly gave me a heart attack." Jack offered a charming smile, hoping to disarm her. "Sorry, Ginger. I was just admiring your stand. It's quite impressive." Ginger raised an eyebrow, her gaze flicking to the glowing trail. "Impressive enough to bring you snooping around back here?" Jack's smile faded, replaced by a serious expression. "Ginger, have you noticed anything strange lately? With your stand, or your magic?" Ginger's eyes narrowed, her grip tightening on the ladle. "What are you implying, Jack?" Before Jack could respond, Holly appeared at the counter, her eyes wide with feigned excitement. "Ginger, I heard your cocoa is extra magical today. Mind if I try a cup?" Ginger's expression softened, her attention shifting to Holly. "Of course, dear. Coming right up." As Ginger turned to pour the cocoa, Holly mouthed to Jack, "Anything?" Jack nodded subtly, his eyes flicking to the base of the stand. Holly followed his gaze, her brow furrowing as she spotted the glowing trail. She leaned in, her voice barely a whisper. "We need to find out if Ginger knows something." Jack nodded, his mind racing. They needed to tread carefully, but time was running out. The celestial star's magic was pulsing stronger, its light growing brighter. Whatever was happening, they needed to unravel the mystery before it was too late. Ginger handed Holly a steaming mug, the rich aroma of chocolate and peppermint filling the air. "There you go, dear. Careful, it's hot." Holly took a sip, her eyes widening as the magical cocoa danced on her tongue. "Ginger, this is amazing." Ginger harumphed, but her cheeks flushed with pride. "It's just a little something I whipped up. Now, what's all this about magical trails and strange happenings?" Jack leaned against the counter, his voice low. "We think something's gone wrong with the celestial star. Its magic is acting up, and we're trying to figure out why." Ginger raised an eyebrow, her gaze flicking to the glowing trail. "And you think my cocoa stand has something to do with it?" Before Jack could respond, a sudden gust of wind swept through the square. The Christmas tree's lights flickered wildly, and the ornaments began to sway. A nearby snowman toppled over, its carrot nose rolling across the cobblestones. Ginger scowled, her hands on her hips. "What in the name of Saint Nick is going on?" Holly pointed to the hot cocoa stand, her eyes wide. "Look!" The stand's awning was pulsing with light, the glow matching the celestial star's shimmer. Suddenly, the mugs on the counter began to rattle, their contents bubbling and frothing. A jet of cocoa shot up like a fountain, splattering a nearby elf with chocolate. Ginger gasped, her hands flying to her cheeks. My cocoa! It's gone wild. Jack stepped back, his eyes scanning the chaotic scene. The star's magic must be affecting it. We need to contain this before it gets out of hand. Holly set her mug down, her fingers weaving a spell. She murmured under her breath, her hands glowing with a soft green light. The cocoa fountain began to shrink, the chocolate flowing back into the mugs. Ginger watched, her mouth agape. Well, I'll be. You've got some skill, Holly. Holly smiled, her cheeks flushing with the compliment. Thanks, Ginger. Now, let's see if we can figure out what's causing this. As the last of the cocoa settled, the stand's awning stopped pulsing. The Christmas tree's lights returned to their normal twinkle, and the ornaments stilled. Holly and Jack exchanged a relieved glance, the crisis averted for now. Ginger sighed, her grumpy demeanor returning. Well, that was a mess. Now, what do you need from me? Jack leaned in, his voice serious. We need to know if you've noticed anything unusual lately. Anything that might be connected to the celestial star. Ginger pursed her lips, her brow furrowing in thought. Now that you mention it, there's been something odd going on with my cocoa. It's been sparkling. Holly's eyes widened. Sparkling? Like the star's magic? Ginger nodded. Exactly like that. And it's been happening more and more lately. I thought it was just a fluke, but now. She trailed off, her gaze flicking to the glowing trail. Jack's eyes narrowed, his mind racing. We need to find out why the star's magic is affecting your cocoa. There must be a connection somewhere. Holly nodded, her determination renewed. We'll figure this out, Ginger. We promise. Ginger harumphed, but her eyes softened. I hope so, dear. I don't want my cocoa causing any more chaos. As they spoke, a sudden commotion drew their attention. A group of townsfolk had gathered nearby, their voices raised in concern. Holly and Jack exchanged a glance, their investigation momentarily forgotten. What's going on over there? Holly asked, her brow furrowing. Ginger squinted, her eyes scanning the crowd. Looks like trouble. You two better go see what's happening. Holly and Jack nodded, their senses on high alert. They hurried towards the commotion, leaving Ginger to clean up the cocoa mess. As they approached the crowd, the sound of raised voices grew louder, the tension palpable. A familiar voice cut through the din, its tone sharp and demanding. I insist on knowing what's going on here. Holly and Jack exchanged a knowing glance. Kristoff Kringle was at the center of the commotion, his eyes blazing with anger. This couldn't be good. Holly and Jack pushed through the crowd, the tension growing with each step. Kristoff stood at the center, his face a mask of outrage, holding a small, glowing object aloft. It pulsed with a warm, golden light, a fragment of the celestial star. Where did you find that? Holly demanded, stepping forward. Kristoff turned, his eyes narrowing as he recognized her. Ah, Holly Evergreen. Always the inquisitive one. I found this little gem hidden away in a rather unusual place. Jack's gaze sharpened, his voice cool. And where might that be? Kristoff smirked, enjoying the attention. In a cocoa bean, of all things. Ginger Snapdragon's special reserve, I believe. Ginger gasped from behind her stand, her hand flying to her mouth. My cocoa beans? But how? Holly's mind raced, pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. The joy fragment. It must have been drawn to Ginger's cocoa because of the happiness it brings to everyone. Jack nodded, his eyes meeting Holly's. That's why her cocoa was acting up. The fragment's magic was amplifying its effects. Kristoff scoffed, his grip tightening on the fragment. Yes, very clever. But the real question is, why are these fragments scattered across town? And what are you two going to do about it? Holly stepped closer, her voice steady. We're going to find them all and restore the celestial star. And you're going to hand over that fragment, Kristoff. A murmur rippled through the crowd, eyes widening at Holly's boldness. Kristoff's smirk faded, his expression turning calculating. And if I refuse? Jack's voice was like ice, his power flickering in his eyes. Then we'll have a problem, won't we? The air crackled with tension. Kristoff's gaze flicked between Holly and Jack, weighing his options. Suddenly, he laughed, the sound forced and harsh. Very well. I have no use for a single fragment. But mark my words, if you two can't handle this, I will step in. He tossed the fragment to Holly, who caught it deftly. The golden light pulsed in her hand, warm and inviting. She nodded, her resolve unshaken. We'll handle it, Kristoff. You can count on that. As Kristoff stalked away, the crowd dispersed, the tension dissipating. Holly looked down at the fragment, her eyes filled with determination. 1 down, 11 to go. Jack placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch reassuring. We'll find them, Holly. Together. Ginger approached, her expression a mix of awe and concern. I can't believe that was in my cocoa bean. What can I do to help? Holly smiled, grateful for the support. Keep an eye out for anything unusual, Ginger. And spread the word. We need everyone in Merry Hollow to be on the lookout for these fragments. Ginger nodded, her resolve firming. You can count on me, dear. We'll find those fragments and save our town. As Ginger returned to her stand, Holly turned to Jack. We should get back to the bakery and examine this fragment. Maybe it can give us a clue about the others. Jack agreed, his gaze scanning the square. The sooner we find them, the sooner we can restore the star and bring balance back to Merry Hollow. Holly cradled the golden fragment, its pulsating light casting a warm glow on her face. She led the way back to her bakery, Jack close behind, their breaths misting in the crisp air. The townsfolk parted for them, murmurs of encouragement and hope trailing in their wake. Inside the bakery, the comforting scent of gingerbread and sugar enveloped them. Holly set the fragment on the counter, its light reflecting off the gleaming surfaces. She reached out, her fingers hovering over the glowing shard. Be careful, Jack cautioned, his eyes fixed on the fragment. Holly nodded, her fingertips brushing the warm surface. A surge of raw, unfiltered joy coursed through her, like 1,000 happy memories condensed into a single moment. She gasped, her eyes widening as the sensation overwhelmed her. Laughter bubbled up from deep within, spilling out in a melodious sound that filled the room. Jack stepped closer, concern etched on his face. Holly? Are you all right? She turned to him, her eyes sparkling with unshed tears of joy. It's incredible, Jack. I can feel it, the happiness, the warmth. It's like every wonderful Christmas memory rolled into one. Jack tentatively reached out, his hand covering hers on the fragment. His eyes widened as the joy hit him, a grin spreading across his face. He laughed, the sound rich and genuine, blending with Holly's in a harmonious duet. The bakery seemed to respond to their laughter, the strings of lights twinkling brighter, the scent of sweets growing stronger. The gingerbread men on the counter began to dance, their little frosting smiles widening as they joined in the merriment. Holly and Jack looked at each other, their laughter subsiding, leaving them with grins that couldn't be contained. The fragment's power was intoxicating, a pure distillation of holiday spirit that filled every corner of the room. This is just one fragment, Holly breathed, her eyes reflecting the golden light. Imagine the power of the entire star. Jack's grin faded, his expression growing thoughtful. And imagine the chaos if that power falls into the wrong hands. Their smiles faded as the weight of their task settled back onto their shoulders. The fragment's joy was a reminder of what they were fighting for, but also a warning of what they stood to lose. Holly gently slid the fragment into a small velvet pouch, the glow dimming as she pulled the drawstring tight. She looked at Jack, her resolve renewed. We need to find the other fragments before it's too late. Jack nodded, his eyes meeting hers. Together. Holly tucked the velvet pouch into her pocket, the fragment's warmth radiating through the fabric. She looked at Jack, her expression serious. We need to find the other fragments. Can you sense them? Jack closed his eyes, his brows furrowing in concentration. His ice magic pulsed, a chill sweeping through the bakery. Holly shivered, her breath misting in the sudden cold. After a moment, Jack's eyes snapped open, a mix of awe and concern within them. They're everywhere, Holly. Scattered across Mary Hollow like pieces of a puzzle waiting to be put together. Holly's eyes widened, the magnitude of their quest dawning on her. We need to find them all. Before someone else does. Jack nodded, his gaze distant as he focused on the fragment signals. Each one has a unique signature. Joy, peace, love, hope, they're all out there, calling to us. Holly reached out, her hand squeezing his. We'll find them, Jack. Together. The bakery's lights flickered, the strings of holiday bulbs blinking in a sudden, erratic pattern. A high-pitched whine cut through the air, growing louder and more insistent. Holly clapped her hands over her ears, her eyes scanning the room. What's happening? She shouted over the noise. Jack's gaze sharpened, his voice barely audible. It's a magical alarm. Something's triggered it. The whine reached a crescendo, then abruptly cut off. The lights steadied, their glow pulsing gently. Holly lowered her hands, her heart pounding. What set it off? Jack's eyes met hers, a sense of urgency passing between them. Another fragment. It's close, Holly. And it's in trouble.